number 1 on our agenda, calling the meeting to order. And I will remind you, although I think everybody here knows this already, we are live streamed and recorded. The entire meeting is recorded, so just keep that in mind. Item 2 on our agenda is introduction of late items. And what we have tonight is very exciting. We have introduction of new panel members. So Lainey is going to introduce our 2 new panel members.
Thank you, Chair. So I won't go into a lot of detail, but just want to welcome Angela Buick and Jill Yuswa, who are our 2 newest members at large to our design panel meeting, or design panel. And thank you for your interest, and we look forward to having on the panel. I know that you've already tuned in and seen some of our previous meetings, so with your experience, we look forward to hearing your contributions, and staff are certainly available to answer questions if you have any as we go through our proceedings. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and welcome. Item 3 on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. So does anybody have any other items they wish to modify, add, change, or delete from the agenda? Seeing none, I will call for a motion to adopt the agenda as it is. Kevin moved, seconded. I think Kate waved her hand. Okay, all in favor? And we have adopted our agenda. We have item 4, adoption of minutes. So the minutes from our August 12th meeting were attached to the agenda. Were there any comments or corrections or anything on those minutes? And seeing none, I will call for adoption of the minutes from the August 12th meeting. Tony, thank you. Kevin, seconded. All in favor? Good, thank you. Item 5, we have 1 presentation this evening to be introduced. Oh, I didn't even check. Is it Caleb?
Yes.
Yes, okay. To be introduced by Caleb.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The item on tonight's agenda is development permit application number DP1241 for 6330 McGraw Avenue. This is the second phase of a 2-phase residential rental development. This phase is for a 6-story building with 88 dwelling units and underground parking. The current zoning is medium density residential R8, and the relevant design guidelines are the general DPA guidelines. There is 1 variance requested that has been identified, and that is for a height variance from 14 meters to 19.6 meters. With that, I will invite the applicant to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Chair, and all the design panel members. My name is Dariush Piruzli, and I'm presenting this project for you tonight. Can I share the screen, please? So this project, as Caleb mentioned, is the second phase for this project. The phase 1 we started in 2014 and finished in 2016. This is 3. We're going to talk about that in few locations, so I thought it's putting in the front. Everybody gets attention to the existing 3 at this time. Our client, actually, the second generation Vancouver Island-based family, is doing the rental apartment for over 30 years. They have a rental building in Victoria, Canberra River, Duncan, Nanaimo, Parksville, Calgary, Newminster, Westminster, and Montreal. This will be the 10th building actually in Nanaimo, with the 450 units overall and some industrial and commercial buildings. They do the long-term ownership of the property, and they do own by themselves. They run the properties and manage the property. Macroft second is the 10th window, the rental building in Nanaimo. They started from the country club, Madrona Green. The latest one we finished was in the Bowen Road. They have constructed 8 apartment buildings. This will be the third in Nanaimo. This is the proposed the property in question. All the zoning in the area, as you see, this is R8, and then we have R9 right behind us, which is the 6 to 20 story building. Costco, some industrial and some commercial retail around this area. The property is located in Woodgrove North Center. This is before we started in phase 1. As you see, there was a cluster of trees there, empty areas, and majority of these areas is still empty, exception of the deep property already under construction, 108 units in 5 schools. This picture shows after we finished the phase 1, it's actually close to the end of the construction. Wasn't finished, as you see, we didn't really touch these 3 areas. Some, the residential in the area and the buildings in the area. This is from upland looking data in there and phase 1. It's the building right at the upland. And then a new building under construction, 5-story, 108 units, which has a all the parking in Surface Park. And this is from the Centennial Drive. Centennial Drive actually the private road, maintenance with all these separate properties. I will show the original idea of this area. Yeah, it's our phase 1 in different area. At cluster 3, are building from the corner, phase 1. And you see still these trees in the view over there. Then the tree we were talking, the significant tree is actually located in here, and then more clustered trees there. That's another angle from same tree, and the tree area in the back. So when basically this area is subdivided by one developer which will build this building and put all the private road in here, and the idea was to build this mirror image of that building in here and have all sports interior things, interior courtyard type of things, and all these under some underground parking, which will take all those trees out and create without it blocking the view. Our idea when we started, we said, okay, we put in the 2 buildings, keep some corridor open, still keep some of the trees in here, and also curve the building, cut the building there to save that tree. We almost finished the design of the 5.5 story building here until I just wanted to show another one. This one is shows the ocean in the horizon. Phase 1 from 2nd floor up, and in that building they do have a water view in both wings. And the idea was to keep the corridor open for all the buildings there. Yeah, we almost finished that one. We talked with the city a couple of times, and you know, with all the requests having 3-bedroom, studio, very variety of the units, which we did consider until once I got the phone call from Victoria, our landscape architect, and she asked me to go to the site with the Walter Forestry, responsible forestry and operators from City Hall to meet at the site. When I was designed that one originally, I was carving the tree, within 4 meters. They are keep saying me, you need 7 meters. And I said, oh, I can give you the 4.5. Anyhow, at that site meeting, they both ambushed me and said, you know what, we are not going anywhere. You need 7 meters. Variance. Go ahead and do your work. And actually, I did redesign the building over from beginning and push the building from this corner. And, you know, before doing that, actually, I said, okay, let's look at the site content again. It's already part of the story building is close to finishing here. I look at all the basic information I have. 6-story planned building here, and this area is zoned to 6 to 20-story buildings. I knew one point the building for 20 stories, but I guess that is done. And I said, okay, so if I'm building right to this corner, I'm jamming this area. So it's the best thing to do. Let's make the building footprint smaller, have more landscape, put those buildings there. One of the things Victoria and Walter told me, you know what, we don't much, if we are evaluating the trees, that it has a much higher weight than these trees. We can build, we can plant those trees and have it in a couple of years, but we cannot do the bizarre because these are good. So keep this one, if you don't have a choice, take those one out. That's what the new design is about. So I have started from beginning, push the building as much as possible to that corner, which is majority of those we're gonna go, but we're keeping this main tree and creating a larger, more open outdoor area in the south where we have a sun, and also separating the art building from Textega, from new building, and we're making the transition from the 4-story to up to 20-story behind. That's what how basically we reached this point. So that site plan, as you see, we are just putting the 22 parking at the grade. The majority of the parking, additional 45, they are underground parking companies, and it's like this, we're giving a little bit extending up. We also say with having those three in the south, it makes sense to have an amenity room close to there and create a nice outdoor space there, which you will see in landscape drawing. Typical floor plan, as I said, we have 18 studio units, 35 one-bedroom, 32 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms. 3 bedrooms rental is very hard to come by in Nanaimo, and the families there trouble. So let's talk about the building elevation. We tried to get some motifs and the colors from the phase 1. We wanted to basically people to see these are the same extension of the phase 1. In phase 1, we did use some crisper cementitious panel. And here also we're taking some higher end, like Terraclad or something like this in for feature, but majority gonna be RV plants. Using the more natural looking neutral in the main floor for connection and separating the top floor to reduce the effect of the, fire, taller building. And also creating flat roof, we didn't want to go as more than necessary. So in phase one we have some pop-up needs, but here without doing that means we are going to have more height variance. So we didn't want to go that far. So as I said, the mixture of the colors, majority will be hardy. These are showing the wood grain. The majority is going to be actually mixed finish and some feature flat. So rendering the building facing inside because end of the day, phase one and phase two, tenants is kind of managed by them and it's going to be the same. We wanted to show the same development there. And that's why we have interior, entrance in the center. This shows in the background first story that phase one and then phase two. That's the tree. If you see the scale, it's very, I think it's very close to the real. The tree is almost like 4.5 story high. Which is different. More angles from back from Centennial Drive. And this is where the entrance will be to the big development from Centennial Drive. Previous phase 4, and this is phase 1 and 4 story and phase 2 6 story. We are not asking for any addition. We are not applying for additional density. We are also actually below the density. All the reasoning for a little bit looks like a higher variance in the height, which we're going to have a more review with city staff next week. But it's reducing the building footprint, preparing the transition, natural transition between the 4 story to 20 story, giving them more landscape area for, for in the south, for separating with the building. And reduce the coverage, and actually the OCP considered here is the area is the future density. So it's Victoria, sorry I didn't introduce our team, should be in the beginning, but you already heard Victoria, the expert, famous Victoria, the expert. Is our landscape designer, and Scott from RJC is our also is a civil engineer. Victoria, are you there? You can talk about the landscape.
Victoria is not on the call, don't believe.
Another ambush for me. I'm going to cover for her. I don't have much landscape design or the experience, but I try my best. This is the tree we are saving. This is the old amenity outdoor area we were talking. And obviously we are trying to separate this area and have a private setting for all the units as much as possible. The tree selections and it's there. I'm sorry I cannot help on that one. According to my wife, I don't have any experience even take care of my bachelor, so I'm not gonna try to convince you I know anything about the tree management plan. These are the trees going to cross the trees gonna be moved because of the building moved to that corner. And this is the figure. Scott, are you there?
I'm here.
Yeah, would you mind to, unless you have a question for me, the panel, or you want to stay for the end, Scott can continue on the civil.
Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
Thanks, Darius. Not much in terms of civil servicing required on this property. Everything's kind of set up from phase one, so we're just expanding on that. With the new bylaws that have come into effect, we're going to have to expand the underground rock bed storage for stormwater management. It'll all be kept in rock beds below the surface. And that's, you can see there with the hatched areas, two green surrounding on the east side of the property. Yeah, one there and one down to the south, which will be combined with a bioswale that Victoria has incorporated into her landscape plan. So we'll take some roof drainage and put it onto the surface into a swale with some proper vegetation and an overflow as well, so we're not flooding anybody out. I think that's the extent of civil. When I introduced Scott, I said artist like one of what I'm thinking, J.E.A. Anderson. Sorry about that, Scott. I include the report too. I'm not sure if we can add this to the design panel or not, but so Scott and myself ready to your answer. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Darius. Perfect. I will open this up as I always do by asking panel members if anybody has any questions for staff. And seeing lots of shaking heads. Okay, I won't be mean and start with the new people. So I'm gonna start in the middle of my squares with Marie.
It's Marie?
Yep,
Oh, sorry. Your sound is really muffled today.
it's the mask.
Yeah, it is.
Well, first of all, thank you, Darius, for a very thorough presentation. I really like the context that you gave us and the overview views of the property. It's a little easier to sort of understand how everything's fitting together there after, having look at it from the ground and then from the elevations and so on. So anyway, I think any addition to more rental buildings is great. I have a few comments, however, where I want to just sort of talk about, first of all, the form and character of the building itself. I'm finding that, I think the staff made a comment about your roof elevation, the sort of flatness of it. I'm finding that there's kind of a visual emphasis on that 6th story. You have elements, vertical elements that draw your eye up, like using the red to go up, and then you have the roof kind of forming a T-section. I think part of that has to do with the fact that it's the color that you're using in your finishes. It's all very dark, and you've got these very dark, heavy outlines. So you end up actually looking up, and that whole 6th story to me is totally emphasized, and I don't know if that's really what you want. And I have no problem with the 6 stories. I think that's fine. But I don't know if that's what we want to look at. And I look at the building next to it, see how you're trying to sort of match some of the design elements, but that one seems so much lighter and less weighty because there's no emphasis on the roof and the roof line's broken up. So I think if you can really kind of rethink that what you're doing with the roof there. Now, some of them might just be changing the color of the finishes, for example, so it's not that big, the dark emphasis on the top. I don't know, I'm not an architect. I'll try to advise you on that, but I think that's something that really needs to be addressed on the building. The other feature that I thought was staff commented on was your main entrance, I believe, is around the side of the parking lot, right? Where they come off, you've got a drop-off area, I think I saw on the design. When I look at the elevation, it's hard for me to even see where your entrance is, so I think you need to do something to kind of mark that and make it a little bit more obvious. But I'm wondering as well about the two drop-off spaces there. It just seems like a really awkward situation where you have cars sort of backing, one coming in, one going out, and your entrance then is also occupied by two parking spaces. I'm wondering if you'd be able to consider even having more of a paved, some kind of pavers and plants, a little place to sit, even a protected area to sit in that area, and just take those two spaces out and have the drop-off area really just the front parking spots at the beginning. That would be a suggestion. And that might also open up the sense of that entrance space for people coming into the parking lot when they see, oh, it's not just cars crammed in there. That's the entrance. It would be marked off by a kind of more of a plaza effect. And then speaking to that, it sort of moves on to the landscaping. There's a lot of buildings going in here. This is really going to be a fairly high density area for Nanaimo. And I think the green spaces here are really, really important. And I'm seeing a lot of, we didn't get, in the landscape plan, we only have the landscape plans of this section of your whole project. And unfortunately, we didn't see how this is all going to knit together with the first phase. And I think, again, the developer, not just you, but the neighboring ones, have to really think of the green space here because there's not a lot for people to sort of walk in some greenery, trees, grass, something like that. There's no little park out there. There's not a lot in there. And I'm seeing a lot of parking lot and a lot of buildings. And so maybe there's ways you can add to that by putting more trees in the parking lot, islands, ensuring that there's enough trees and grass in around the project. I'm not sure what else some of the other people might have some suggestions, but I really think that's important in this whole area to make sure that there's going to be some green space for all those people living in those buildings who come down to walk their dogs or walk their kids or whatever, right? Stroll on the street. So those would be my suggestions, and otherwise it's a great addition there, and thank you for your presentation.
Thanks, Marie.
Thank you, Mark. Sorry, through the chair, should I respond or I wait to the end?
No, if you would like to respond, that's great.
I want to thank you, Murray, for all the comments. I think it all makes sense. We did try to basically to do a couple of those here. I'm sure we can do more as well. One of the things you are 100% right, the open space, the shortage of open space is really obvious in this area. And I think each development needs to do their own share to that, basically to achieve. That's why originally I was thinking to keep those trees, but obviously I couldn't. As you mentioned, it's all the developers need to do that, and to achieve that, if they are separated, it actually make it harder. But if they are somehow closer to the one area, it makes more sense. We have open space for this area, it actually is more parking, but some green space in this development in here. If I can, you see in my drawing, hope so. That's the area we actually provided all the landscape area. These areas, there is no parking actually there. We're coming, drop off and back up and close. Similar to what we have in the these two buildings. At one point I was to put the entrance there, but this central garage is actually very narrow. It's not the best location for doing anything. And our client has a very good point. So these buildings going to be managed and work with one thing in mind. They are same development. For sure, we can improve the entrance and provide some sitting space.
Okay, thanks, Darish. I will, my screen changed again. I will call now Kevin.
Thanks, Charles, and thanks, Darius, for your presentation. Very nice presentation as usual. I think you did really well with the siting of the building. I think it works really fluent with the original building and how it kind of flows along Sentinel Drive, and I think that it's very successful. For the most part, I like the form and character. There are some things that probably need to be addressed, and I would probably just echo Marie's comment about the entry. Did you look at other options within the form and character of the building to enhance the entry?
Yeah, anytime then you have an interest in the, if you have an L-shaped building, the best location is the corner. If it's outside corner, you have lots of, real estate available to do bigger job. But if it's inside corner, it's always tougher. That's why we created a little bit high, more reddish color, similar to what we did in phase 1. We can provide some sort of, we have overhang, but we can create some sort of extended overhang with some single wall, and maybe a little bit raised here to create it more presentable entrance.
Yeah, because that's the thing is the entry really will not be definable unless you do something like Marie suggested and use the hardscape and landscape to make it more presentable. But even if you consider on that facade a more contrasting treatment and material, that could be one way to make it more definable without having to get into like a huge overhang or anything like that. But that said, my only other issue with the form and character is the south elevation, and even though you've kind of broken it up into 3 angles, 3 different facades, did you ever consider taking the center section and doing something totally contrasting with materials and treatments on that one, just to break it up?
This is a smaller building compared to all the neighbors, but it's not that small either. So usually the viewpoint of the eye angle do not see the building as we see in the plan. I mean, one angle will be, this is the one you will see the biggest building view, which is you're coming from the back side. I try to separate the cluster, the studios in one side, try to make it a little bit different, guys. I think there is a room for improvement for sure, but I can look at the options.
Yeah, it's just that, obviously I took more emphasis on the rendering of that side view compared to the elevation, because you never see it in elevation view. But Yeah, that view there, and it just seems that I disagree with Maria. I like that band of roof that you have separating the 5th and 6th floor. I think that provides something, and the dark colors too. I think it kind of, if anything, kind of puts less emphasis on that floor. But there might be a way to run something down on that one plane that might help to blend it together more, that you have a separate thing that can flow down from the upper floor. I'm not sure. I'm not going to tell you what to do with your project, but there might be an opportunity there if everybody else is on board with that. So, and I agree with Marie with respect to the getting more landscape into the project with Landscape Island. This project has I didn't check the block score on this project, but with the proximity to all the amenities available, the need for parking in that area wouldn't be as necessary, especially on the surface. So I would fully support it if you needed a variance. Fully support a variance to include more landscape elements. I looked at the landscape concept. I thought Victoria did a great job. I like her the palette of her tree palette. I really like it. It's not just 2 or 3 trees. There's a palette of trees there. It's quite dense, and I really like how there's an outdoor amenity space outside of the amenity room, and how it's going to all work with the bioswale and everything. So the variance is pretty extreme. You're basically looking at 2 floors. And how that might affect the high-rise that's going to be built in behind it as far as blocking potential views. I guess you can say that if you had a wider building, you'd be blocking lower floor views too. But my only other comment was a staff comment, which is a pedestrian link between the 2 buildings. So hopefully do something across the drive aisle to connect the 2. But other than that, I think it's a very nice project. So well done, and thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Again, to the chair, I got some response. One thing about the connecting the 2 buildings. Yes, the sidewalk. Yes, we will have arranged the sidewalk here, connecting the sidewalk from this side over there, reduce the speed and making better connections. Regarding the color mentioned, and Maria also mentioned, my thought behind it to have a gray color in the top floor. We do have a lot of gray stains in the Nanaimo like today, and the idea is to basically making it less visible. If you put the bright color up there, it still shows more. That's why I feel, and we're putting the bigger, bands there to create the separation and again reduce the effect of the taller building. But end of the day, reality is a 6-story building, not 4. So this is the corner you see there. Yeah, as you see, you are correct. This is lighter color. This is the more heavier color. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I totally agree with your color theory, and especially with railings. If you had put on white fascias and white railings, everything would just punch out more. So I always like to see, especially with railings, seeing black railings and black fascias, the same thing. It just seems that they aren't as noticeable as lighter or brighter colors. So I totally agree with you.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Moving on, I will call upon Jill.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for your presentation, sir. I have one question that I'd like you to answer straight away, if you would, for me. And that is, will this building be pet friendly?
I know they are my clients. They do have a pet in all the building. Obviously, I'm not going to manage the building, but as far as I know, they do have a pet-friendly thing.
Well, my question is because it will impact the landscape plan. I'm looking at this, my first level of review is to look at this from kind of an urban design and an operational aspect. I actually live in a building that is pet friendly, and I live in one of Victoria's landscapes. Lucky for me, we have lots of adjacent green space. That's not the case here. So before I look at any of the landscape details, it would be very helpful to know if there's going to be pets, what scale the pets are. Are they going to be, small dogs under 20 pounds, or are they going to be larger? So that will be helpful information.
I will for sure, when I respond to the design panel recommendation, I can get those information from my client.
Thank you very much, sir. Now, the second comment that I have, I won't repeat other members' comments. They're excellent comments, as are the staff comments. But I'm going to dial it back and maybe be a bit unpopular. But when I look at the context of Dover, my impression is that from a neighborhood viewpoint, it is a very quiet visual. There's some very, very strong architectural impressions along uplands, very high quality along uplands. And I guess my comments are, with such quiet visuals and a request for a taller building, would you consider a color palette that is more organic? I think with a taller building, I think that might be a consideration for the neighborhood, for people in single-family dwellings, and so on. So I'm going to leave my comments at that urban design scale or suburban design scale as we may speak before I get into any landscape details, because I think the color palette is a pretty significant consideration here.
I do agree in some extension. The more neutral color helps the building to be not as much, screaming or being more noticeable. And I think we can work around that. We still be gonna somehow tie to the phase one, but we can reduce the more brighter color in this thing.
Well, you have this lovely, on the ground, you spoke of the tying the ground together with that particular organic color. If you look at your 6-story scheme. Yes, and I wondered whether it wouldn't be prudent to repeat that and perhaps step away from the brighter color.
Yeah, for sure we will consider that.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, was that it, Jill?
That's it for me.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to scan through my screens here. Angela.
Hello, everybody. Just like to say thank you for having me today. Pleasure. And thank you, Derek, for your presentation. It's in North Nanaimo, and a very neat rental infill project. Just like to say, I do like how the buildings do flow together and face each other. It's sort of in a sense, almost building a little bit of a focal point for all the buildings to feel sort of connected. So I do like that. Yes, a lack of green spaces for sure. I'm just wondering, green space that's in the landscape plan right now with the bioswale connected to the amenity. Is there a play area considered in that area, or is there fencing? Is it child friendly?
Yes, all the building is child friendly, and actually we have a 3-bedroom. The majority of being in this corner actually looking there. My experience working with Victoria for so long, I know she does like to not formal type of the arrangement. It's the one more neutral and natural type of the playground type of thing. Yeah, this area needs to be programmed. We did talk about putting the black railing around this area, which is we did have in the phase 1, and her response was actually these metal is actually adding more commercial manufacturing material and take away from the natural looks of the thing. So still up to the discussion. I think that we're going to have a small meeting with the city staff. Yes, this area is child friendly. It's going to be programmed, but how we're going to make it, because it's private, these surrounding areas, we're going to have more buildings coming, and I'm pretty sure they may have even less landscape than what we have in here. So we want that to be some sort of exclusive for our development. So we have some work to do to make it happen. Okay. Everybody using visually, but not really for everybody to other neighbors also using that.
Yeah, I just, it would be nice to see that it's sort of a safe place for children to play. And then I understand, I know that other town members would like to see more islands of green space, but at the same time it would be really nice to see any more green space connected, and I don't know how it could get connected with the future developments, but it would be nice to see those connections happening with the future discussions with the 2 other projects. The other part is the green space tying into your variance of height. I'm just curious, has anybody considered, or is it possible to create a rooftop patio space amenity that could break up the roof line a little bit too, and also create more open space view opportunities for all the residences within the building, the ocean view line?
I wanted to say I love to hear that. When we started, we did have a 5.5 stories. We had bigger footprints, but we have 5.5, which is in that half of the basically another half of the 6th floor. We had a rooftop. Still, I think the client very open to build a rooftop type of the thing. For tenants, we did one project for East Group in Lansford. We had a rooftop area looking at the Bear Mountain. This was like 8 years ago. I worked with the client, planned for another project, asked them how that works, and he said everybody loves it. with the less and less green space, people, even, and, in the, they can go up there. We actually have a community barbecue up there, and they can go, and in sunny days, one point I saw there is a chair, they can get the, sun, what's it called? Sitting in the sun. Anyhow, it is a great, of course, they do support it as long as, we have a staff support, still we can do some rooftop area, which provide more green space up there for neighbors too, it's not just for them. So.
Yeah, I just thought with the requested variance, if there was an opportunity to maybe get a little bit of height in one part of the building and offer some rooftop space with vegetation, that might an opportunity for more amenity space if it's lacking in the actual site itself. The other question I had, is there any bike storage within the building?
It is. It's underground. We have to provide, I believe, around 60% of the units have to have a bike. All the units, they do have a storage inside the unit, but we are providing the bike storage there, bike storage. Basically, these are part of the bylaw requirement. If we don't meet the requirement, we have to ask for variance. We are not asking variance, so we are providing 50% of the bike for me.
Okay. The only other comment I might have is I didn't see that the lower levels were connected to the street. Are they all just patio? Without connection?
That actually was one of the staff comments as well. In the phase one, I do like to show the phase one here. We had actually perpendicular parking here, and all these units, they have access. We have access to all these units as well. So we do have an opportunity to provide, the access from there and get the access to the units here where they are flat, but some areas going to be dropped. So I think we have an opportunity to get the 80% of the main floor access from the outside, but maybe it's like 20% not because of the height differences and the restriction like PMC, that type of thing. So, yeah.
I feel like it would benefit the area if there is some connectivity to the street with the people moving in and out of the building. And those that like to bike clearly, it's easy and out for them. So it might be attractive for people without vehicles.
Yeah. Sure.
I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. It's all good point.
Thank you, Angela. Next, I will call on Tyler.
Hello, everyone. Sorry, I only realized that I had my screen off a good chunk of the time, so my apologies. But thank you, Darius, for the presentation, and excellent to see how much projects are coming together in this particular part of town, this building here. As much that I like about the project, but I'm just going to focus on reiterating a couple of the other comments. I do appreciate Beth's comments around the landscaping, as you mentioned a few times. Might be challenging, and I'm not sure how you get more in there. I did like the comments around the islands, but I thought Angela's comments around connectivity were really on point. So again, not sure how all that all comes together, but it's about any project. Usually gets said more landscaping the better, but in this one, I really feel that is the case. So, and with the only other comments, I think the comment around the entrance, there's something something that can be done there. The other cost on the building, I'm really struggling with the dual, the dark bands running parallel to each other. For me, perceptually, it creates a very heavy top. I agree with the comments that it is a 6-story building, but for me, visually, I think it's having the opposite effect than what I think is intended in the guidelines and staff comments probably intention here. So just raise the points. There's something that could be done. But it's a change in color where there is some structural items to step that back. I do think it's. So again, thank you for the presentation and thanks, Charles.
Thanks, Tyler. Tony?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. It's a great looking project in general, form and character in terms of the consistency with its neighbor. The colors, the matching, a lot of the details nice and consistent. They'll be good architectural neighbors. Particularly like the effort you've gone through to save that arbutus tree. And I really appreciate the context and background that you provided at the beginning of your presentation. Just to very quickly repeat some of the things that have been said, but emphasizing the entrance definitely needs strengthening, and it could be done simply by a freestanding canopy. The drop-off and those 2 parking stalls as mentioned is really quite awkward to the point where I wonder whether there's more trouble than they're worth, and if you got rid of those 2 drop-off stalls and the parking area, whether there would be an opportunity for a little more of a grander entrance paved area with a canopy and, dare I say it, a couple more trees. So something like that, I think for 2 stalls might be worth considering. One thought. I really like the idea of the roof deck. We're seeing a lot more of that kind of thing happening with a lot more of these buildings, and it's a great opportunity. In terms of more green space or even more open space, I think that one long parking area you have down the side of the building, often these areas are underutilized, and certainly from my experience as a child, they make great play areas for kids, when there's no cars in the way, obviously, and most people are not going to be driving down there 60 kilometers an hour or faster, so if a little attention was paid to some feature paving or even meandering paved path-looking thing down the middle of the aisle, for example, I think that there's an opportunity there to do something a little more creative, get a little more use out of it, and give another different kind of outdoor opportunity for some of the certainly the kids that will be here, maybe some of the adults with, put a basketball hoop at the end of the driveway or something like that. Just a thought. I too like the idea of staff's comment about some sidewalk connections for those ground floor units to the street frontage. Some of them are quite far away from the street, obviously, but as you did on the other phase, you could introduce a little meandering internal sidewalk or something to tie them all together. That might be a possibility. I'm not concerned about the height variance. 6-story buildings are pretty common these days, and particularly if, future zoning around there allows the possibility for buildings this high or possibly higher. The one item I'd like to spend just a moment on is the roof line that we've all talked about. Everybody's highlighted, and there are a lot of opinions, and I have one. My feeling is that, first of all, I don't mind it the way it is. It's just an honest expression of a building that's 6 stories high, and as far as I'm concerned, that's fine. However, the notion that it does bother people to the extent of even perhaps as mentioned, I think by Marie or somebody, actually emphasizing the top of the building. I wonder if you might consider cutting the roof, the topmost roof, back in areas except where it's covering balconies. It's not necessary in those areas that are not balconies. It would break up that topmost roof line, and if the continuous bend at the 6th floor, not the roof, but the 6th floor, if that was the continuous strongest form horizontally, that's what you'd have, that would be the most focus, and you'd see that, and sort of a broken up roof above it, which would de-emphasize, I think, the topmost roof. So your most continuous strong horizontal line will be where your arrow is on basically the 6th floor level, and your topmost roof, 6th floor roof level would be broken up, and that would de-emphasize it, as I think I've said. It would make the building look a little bit more dramatic and interesting, in my opinion. But more importantly, it would relate it, I think, more to Phase 1, which is a very irregular and very interesting roof line, and it might actually provide a little more harmony between the two buildings if the new one, the proposed one, had a slightly more articulated top roof. Anyway, it's just a thought at this point, so I'll just leave it at that, and thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. All good points. For sure, I will look at these again. I think there is lots of good recommendations.
Okay, thanks, Tony. Kate.
Okay, thank you, Dariush, for the presentation. And I'm not going to add anything. I think everything has been covered. I agree with most of what has been said, and the points I really agree with have been emphasized. So I don't want to take up too much time. I guess I will say yes, more landscaping always. I do believe improving the pedestrian connections, as it's been said by other panel members, will really benefit this project and how the people who live here experience the neighborhood. And then I think with the kind of improved pedestrian connections, you will alleviate you will make it better for like pet owners and families and all the different kinds of people living in this building. And so I just wanted to re-emphasize the pedestrian connections because you are in such a great location, and there are big parks not too far. There's lots of different amenities that you can really access. And the one other thing I just wanted to repeat was Jill picked up on the color palette that you're using, and I also thought that maybe increasing a bit of the material you're using to, I think, replicate kind of wood, a little bit more of that warmth would be, I think it would really make your project even stronger, and it would play off of the Arbutus a little bit more as well. Which I also appreciate that you listened to the landscape architect and saved it. Yeah, but I don't have anything else to say, so thank you, Charles.
Thanks, Kate. Okay, I also don't really have anything to add. I think it's been a very good discussion, and pretty much all of my points that I was going to raise have been covered, which is great. But I will, similar way, I will chime in on a couple of them. And I think the big one that we've all been talking about is the extended landscape, and part of your rationale for the height variance was reducing the building footprint to increase the open space, yet you have 15 more parking stalls than you need. So I think it's really worthwhile to take all these comments into consideration and even consider reducing the number of surface parking stalls that you have in favor of landscape. That would, I think, benefit the project greatly. Just a comment about the height variance. It's always tough with these zones where the height limit's 14 meters, which means 4 stories, you know, on a good day. And I think as Tony said, we're generally moving away from 4-story wood frame buildings these days. So you're not increasing the density, you're only increasing the height, which is, you know, often those two they both go up together. So you've clearly reduced your footprint, raised your height, but I think you need to take that opportunity further with the landscaping. Yeah, pretty much everything else was covered. I think you know, we're getting pretty picky, as we always do with you, Dariush, because you bring us such good ones. So it's been a great discussion. Now I have the fun part. So I've tried tonight to be really good and write down very carefully worded recommendations. Fingers crossed.
Sorry, Charles, may I, before you look at those recommendations, regarding the parking, the phase 1 actually was based on the old parking bylaw. Because this is one property, we assume this is overall going to be new, one property, and all will be based on the new parking bylaw. So based on that, we have 16 additional in phase 1, not overall. So we have, I think we have 4 or 5 overall additional parking,
Okay.
and hopefully we can push that 4 or 5 and add more land to it. So it's not going to be reduced by 15, it's going to be reduced by 4 or 5. And our experience in the site after building 2016, the parking we have over there is most of the time it has a lot of additional area, lots of empty ones. So it's we're working on that with the city staff and with the design panel recommendations. Hopefully we can extend our landscape and reduce some parking.
Right, okay, so
Whatever we have extra. We don't want to go for additional variance.
No.
Just go to the meet the requirement and provide as much as we can on that.
Yeah, no, I understood. I saw the 15 number and I just thought that was for the whole site. But and then again, that's where Tony's comment about using that hopefully little used parking area more as a landscape feature than a parking feature would be a good approach.
Could I just add something?
Yeah?
Charles?
Yeah, Tony.
I was just going to point out, if I read the drawings correctly, the underground parking extends under that surface parking. So if any cars are removed from there, obviously it would be hard landscaping and, built up planters or pavers or whatever. So it's not going to be, soft landscape green space one way or another, but it could be a different kind of landscape space.
Right.
But this area is the entrance to the better area. We remove and create a more amenity space and more green space and people the entrances. Yeah, sorry, I'm jumping in, but trying to thanks.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so I'm going to try this. There's a lot of them. So we'll do our best. So I tried to add everybody's comments together into one recommendation rather than just writing down all the recommendations. So what I have is actually, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I have 9 recommendations. I'll go through them and then you can let me know if I got it right or not. So all of these I'm going to preface by saying applicant to consider. Number 1 is alternate roof design to break up and reduce the visual weight of the 5th and 6th floor roof forms. Number 2, include a design feature to emphasize the main entrance in the overall design. Number 3, redesign the drop-off area for a more plaza-like space. Number 4, increase the landscape / green space areas between the two buildings. Number 5, alternate design for the center portion of the south elevation. And then, Kevin, that was kind of, I think you were focusing on that center portion, but you can let me know if that's correct or not.
Yeah, can I just jump in, or do you want to finish? Can I just jump in on that? I think that...
Sure.
Okay, I just wanted to say that this, with everything else that was discussed regarding form and character and the use of earth tones, I think the entranceway form and character, and also that elevation, that section of the south elevation, are a great opportunity to introduce earth tone colors there. So you don't have to put that in there, but I think I wanted Bruce to hear that.
Right.
Thanks.
Okay. Number 6, I was going to say add, but I think it was, Derry, you said it's already been considered, but provide the pedestrian linkage between the buildings and landscape areas. Number 7, revised color scheme using more subdued / organic color palette, similar to the neighborhood context. Number 8, consider providing additional green space as a rooftop amenity. And number 9, consider the street front access connection to the street for the at-grade units. Did I get them all? I got 1 thumbs up. Any other comments or questions or suggestions on those?
Do we vote on each item, or what?
No,
There's a couple that I don't agree with. But,
okay, well, what I'll do is I'll ask for someone to put a motion forward, and then we can discuss it.
Do we have Darius take his share screen now?
Yeah, sorry. No?
Okay, so would someone like to propose a a motion with those 9 recommendations, and I will say support for the variance. I didn't hear any strong negatives for the variance. So we'll have the 9 recommendations and support for the height variance as part of the motion.
I can.
Okay.
I'd be happy to put a motion in, but of the 9 items, there are a couple that I have a little difficulty with. So.
That's okay. We can talk them through.
Oh, okay. In that case, I'd be happy to move that the project be approved with the 9 recommendations attached.
Okay, thank you. And Marie, you moved it, seconded it, so okay, so.
I can, whatever.
Also, Tony, do you want to add support for the variance?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So that'd be 10.
Okay, and discussion. So, Jill? Oh, you're muted.
Turn your mic on. Can we discuss the variance with the roof garden being a condition of the variance?
That's a tricky one. I think the question for staff. Can we tie variance approvals to conditions?
So through the chair, I think that the best case scenario is we want to seek your input on the form and character. It is up to you whether or not you want to put forward support or be silent on the variance to height. I think we'd be more interested in the comments on the form and character separate from that.
Okay. So I think we've had lots of comment and discussion about the height and the rooftop amenity. So they're the rooftop amenity is included as a recommendation, but we can not support the height variance if that's the preferred way to go, or stay silent. So Tony, you had discussion on the recommendations?
First of all, just in response to Jill's comment, I'm not comfortable or feel whether it's on our mandate to, sort of tie comments and recommendations one to another. Maybe we can, I don't know. The two areas that I had a little bit of difficulty with I think it was the south, the street elevation that I think, Kevin, you had difficulty with that whole bank of, I think they were studio units or something. Personally, I don't have a problem with it. I like the way it breaks up the mass of that building. Otherwise, it would be, it would be much more continuous looking. This way, it chops it up almost into three kind of distinct facades. And secondly, going to a different color scheme, even though there's some of it already precedent nearby, I think would not be advisable in that this color scheme is related to phase one more, I think, and for me that's its most immediate context, its immediate neighbor, and I think that the color scheme as is fairly appropriate. Yes, it could use some tweaking, a little more wood or something like that, but I'm not sure a drastic 180-degree change with totally different palettes is necessary here.
Okay. Jill?
Through you, Mr. Chair. When bringing that up, bringing the consideration of the palette up, I think the comment was more to back away from the brick color with a taller building, and that's around the context of the neighborhood as you go higher. I think that the building can be made nicely relatable with the color palette it has, as long as the bright color is backed away from.
Okay. Any other input, comments, Kevin?
Yeah, with the form and character of a contemporary building, both in residential and commercial, I've seen bright, like reds and whites and bright colors used in conjunction with the natural wood look, whether it's real wood or the metal cladding that looks like wood, and they can complement each other quite well. But I defer to the architect, and obviously he's spent a lot of time on this project, and I have no problem leaving it the way it is, and I have no problem implementing natural colors. I don't think it's going to change anything. Bright colors are going to be there regardless. So I can go either way on this. It doesn't really faze me. I'll defer to the architect. Thank you.
Tyler?
Yeah, thanks. Good comments, and I disagree with them. I'm not particularly comfortable with getting the color scheme here. I don't find that it takes away from the project. And the other item is I definitely wouldn't be comfortable attaching a particular recommendation to variance approval, because I'm starting to get into we're placing limitations on the, ultimately it will be a council decision, but we're sort of, I think we're getting into too much into the design of the building, and rather than trying to shape what is in front of us with some suggestions. So I'm happy to support the variance as it is for the project in front of us.
And Charles, just so I just respond to Tony's comment about the south elevation. If nobody else jumps on board and supports that something needs to be done with that, I'd be happy to withdraw that recommendation. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to say something here. Yeah, I agree. I think there's some problems with the south rim elevation, but I think our recommendation just should be to look at how to sort of make some aspects of it more subtle, and play with the color palette a little bit, distribution of colors. I have no problem with the red color. I think it adds a little sort of brightness to the neighborhood, but I think, as Tony said, the building needs some tweaking, and we've given lots of suggestions, and I think Dara will take those away and consider them, and that should be part of the recommendation, is just to consider these different options and ways to tweak that design.
Okay. Any other comments? So I will, my comment, I guess, so the color scheme recommendation does suggest or recommend, a subdued or organic color palette. But I also wrote in the neighborhood context. So I think the key there is that, the building needs to relate to its context, which includes the neighboring Phase 1 building. So I think maybe the biggest problem with that is mentioning the subdued or whatever organic color scheme. Perhaps we can just say that consideration for the revision to the color scheme, or not the palette, but the patterning of the color scheme of the building, and leave it at that. Or is that still too prescriptive? Yep, Kevin?
Yeah, I think through history, anyways, that I've been on the panel, we really should be, when we relate to form and character, we're not supposed to really talk about the color of the building, or at least the colors specifically. And Lane, you can correct me on that, but as far as I've been aware over the years, that's we can talk maybe about contrast and stuff like that, but I think we should be very careful how we word that if we're going to request how the colors are done. And also, on another note, unless somebody objects, I'd like to add an amendment, friendly amendment to that motion that Tony made, that I would remove the recommendation regarding the south elevation. Thanks.
Okay, can somebody, well, you're making a friendly amendment. I guess we need a seconder for that friendly amendment. This is where I get into these organizational things, Tony? Oh, you're muted.
I made the motion. I can accept the amendment, or does somebody else have to do that? I don't know the rules.
Yeah, I'm not 100% on the rules either, but I think friendly amendment can be made, and but I think we have to vote on it. So.
Yeah, I think you do. I think you have to vote on it.
So, is there a seconder for that?
Yeah. So we need a first and a seconder, then we vote on it.
Yeah. So Kevin suggested the amendment. Do I have a seconder? Marie, thank you.
Marie.
Any discussion on the amendment to the motion? No? Yes, Kate?
Are you going to reword the one then about the color?
Possibly, yes, but right now we're just amending for the south elevation comment.
Okay.
So the friendly amendment is to remove the comment about the alternative design for the south elevation. Okay, I will call the question. All those in favor of the amendment? I think that was unanimous. That's great. Okay, so item 5 is gone. And item 7, which is the other one we were discussing, color scheme revisions, whatever, do we just take it out and let Gary do what he does best?
How about just consider color schemes to complement the neighboring building and the neighborhood? Consider ways to better complement, perhaps. Does that work?
Kate?
Yeah. What about, like, I think everyone likes the palette. Maybe it's just the distribution of the palette across the building. And it's just, when he goes to respond to some of the other comments, some of the way he distributes the color may also support some of the other recommendations. And also, Charles, I wouldn't use the word organic because every color is organic. Just a point. but maybe it's just about the district, you know.
Yep,
Does that make sense?
does to me.
I think someone needs to come up with a friendly amendment because a motion is on the floor.
Yep.
So if either Marie or Kate or somebody can come up with a friendly amendment that would replace that recommendation, then we can have a seconder and we can vote on.
Joe?
I'd like to make the point that because you haven't done things in the past doesn't mean they shouldn't be considered. And so I don't follow the reasoning of looking at a situation where there's a variance being requested and stepping back from a situation to make something not as imposing on the neighborhood. So that's just my 2 cents.
Okay. Does anyone want to take a shot at, or do you want me to take a shot at revised wording?
Could we just say something like consider ways to form and color to better complement the first phase of building and the neighborhood? And leave it less specific. We've talked about that in terms of the roof line, and we talked about it in terms of some of the elevations and just the distribution of color. We've given suggestions, so that leaves it open to consider that. So consider through form and color ways to better complement the existing phase 1 building in the neighborhood.
Jones?
Yep. Tony?
I'm having difficulty with this item too, and you and I know that as AIBC members there are limitations on what we can and cannot discuss, criticize, comment on, etc. on another architect's work. One of them being, specific uses of color. We can talk about palette and context and compatibility, those kinds of things, but we can't talk about specific color schemes. In this particular case, because there is a variety of color schemes existing, some very soft and quiet, and some like phase 1 here, a little stronger, this new project is proposing to relate to this stronger phase 1, and I don't have a problem with that. And I'm wondering if we aren't getting down to a level of where it's almost a matter of personal taste. I like this kind of color scheme, and I like that kind of color scheme. In which case, we're going to have, there's 7 members, they're going to have 7 different opinions. So, frankly, I don't know how we deal with it. As an architect, I have to really watch what I'm saying here. But I've already said I like the project, but I'm not sure I want to go any further and criticize color schemes. If others on the panel feel strongly enough that they want to do it or suggest a serious change to the color scheme that's presented, I may have to back out of this particular recommendation on motion or something, I don't know, but we'll see how the discussion evolves.
Well, yeah, understood, and I think it's also important for everyone to remember that we're having a discussion around this table, and the applicant is, not participating in, but observing our discussion. But also that these are recommendations. We are not saying that thou must do this. It's just that the applicant needs to consider this. And sometimes those considerations cause a change in the building and sometimes they don't. So I have a revised wording for number 7, suggested by Marie. I'll paraphrase, I'll read it. It's consider...
You can put it in architectural language if you like.
Consider revised distribution of form and color with the phase 1... revised distribution of form and color scheme I've got with to the phase 1 building and neighborhood context. So with consideration of the phase 1 building and the neighborhood context.
complementary, considering it.
I think that works. It leaves it open for the applicant to decide where he wants to go with that, and may or may not, as you say, result in a change, or have to wait and see. And ultimately, the council is going to approve it, right?
Okay, so this is Marie's amendment to the motion. Do I have a seconder for that? Kate?
Sure.
Okay, any further discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor of the amendment to the motion? Any opposed? One opposed. Okay. So, Tony's original motion is now revised. We have 8 recommendations. So the recommendation about the south elevation design has been removed, and the recommendation about the distribution of form and color has been revised. Any other comments, discussion on the main motion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor? And any opposed? None opposed. Thank you. Thank you, Dariush.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Darius.
Oh, and my other screen just went dead. Look at that. Hang on. Because I think I'm going to get back to my agenda. We have item 6 on our agenda, other business, which I don't think we have any other business. So item 7, I will call for adjournment. I've seen other people actually have a motion for adjournment, but I'm just going to call the question. All those in favor of adjourning? See you now.
See you next time.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Are you too?
Good night.
Goodbye.